Do you remember the moment that you decided to run for mayor?
Do I remember? Well, yes, because we had, it was a bit heartbreaking, actually. We had Natalie Beyonce, fantastic Green Party councillor. I've said to everyone who will listen to me that I wouldn't have joined the Green Party had it not been for Natalie. Um, the Green Party in Tower Hamlets has not the best reputation for being as representative of its communities as it needs to be. But seeing Natalie as a young woman um, who actually has a fantastic reputation, all of the community groups that I work with and have contacts with, we rave about Natalie. She's really common, like uses loads of common sense, really practical, not sectarian or sows division or anything like that. Because of her, I joined the Green Party because of rent increases, outrageous rent increases, she had to step down. And, she's had to move out of the borough or will be shortly moving out of the borough because of that. And so to be honest, we were in a bit of a bind. We were in a tricky situation as to, okay, what should happen now? And I sort of felt like, as I always feel, who is the best person for the job? And sometimes you kind of look at your skills that you've been blessed with, you kind of look at your experience that you've been blessed with, and you kind of go, okay, it's you, my friend, you've got to step up. And that was the situation we found ourselves in. So it's a bittersweet moment where I was 100% behind Natalie. We all were. It's not a situation we wanted, and so we are where we are because of that.
Thank you. So the Tower Hamlets Greens have yet to release their full manifesto, but is there one policy that means the most to you personally that you'll be pushing forward?
Oh, that's so hard because actually I was reading the draft now. There's so much good in there. What we've done is put together like a really visionary, innovative, we want to show what can be done when the political will is there. You're going to push me for just one? Oh, it's got to be the housing then. It's kind of got to be housing. Housing's not a commodity when we think about it. We know we're kind of beyond a housing crisis in Tower Hamlets, where, beyond even a housing emergency, this is feeding into why child poverty is increasing in the borough. It's kind of everything is so connected with the cost of living. It all comes, so much of it comes down to housing and who controls housing. So we want to maximize genuinely affordable housing. We're exploring all possible options to do that. We're not going to allow profiteering on council-owned land. That's something that's within our powers. We can stop that. And obviously the manifesto is coming out in a couple of weeks, so I don't want to say exactly what's in it. But what I will say is we're exploring things like community land trusts. We're exploring things like partnering with neighbouring boroughs to set up our own house building companies that we own. So we then have the scale to build the council homes required. When it comes to people talking about housing, we're not building enough housing. It's always because people put the impetus on housing housing developers. The argument being that profit is a good motivator. And when it comes down to the way the Green Party thinks about the economy, we think the economy has failed us. That experiment has failed. And so we need to wrestle back control and be able to say we need our own companies to build the housing that our residents need, not for luxury flats that sit empty.
So you spoke about in your kind of launch speech, you spoke about alternative ownership models that keep land and community hands permanently. Are these what you were speaking about? And then could you go into a tiny bit more detail about how these would be funded?
Yeah, sure. So the way, in terms of funding, we believe that it's okay to borrow to invest. We currently have reserves in the council, quite high reserves. We would like to borrow against those reserves to invest in social housing. So that's how we would do it. In terms of the, remind me what the first bit was. You want me to go into more detail about
On the alternative ownership models that you're
the
speaking about.
alternative ownership models? So community land trusts is a model in which the cost of the rent is tied to people's wages in the local area. We have a small pilot of the first urban community land trust in Tower Hamlets, in fact, in my ward, Bromley North, which is the St. Clement's place. It originally started out with a dream of having about 200 community-owned flats. After years, it's been kind of like almost 20 years in the making or so. It got chipped away and chipped away and chipped away, where today, I think there's roughly about 20-ish homes that are part of the community land trust, but it basically ties rent to income in perpetuity. So it means that the rent will always be affordable rather than tying it to the market, because markets are unpredictable and anything can happen. And as we're seeing right now, if you tie it to what the market considers market value, that has no bearing on how affordable it is for local people. And it's just living in an alternative reality, really. So that is the community land trust model. But like I said, that is just one example. There are lots of creative ways to look at this, including, like I said, municipally owned companies, which is, I think, something that's been underexplored. And we've got the powers to do. It doesn't require us to have new powers. It just requires us to have the political will to do it.
Okay, thank you. So, different track. Low traffic neighbourhoods have proven hugely divisive in the borough. You previously supported car-free cities. If you're elected, how far do you plan to reduce driving in Tower Hamlets?
So let me start by saying a car-free city, as defined, and as I have done a lot of work on, is not a city with no cars at all. What it means is a city that is free from the dangers, harms, and emissions that comes from mass private car dominance. We always know that there will be some people who will always need a car. You know, some disabled people, some tradespeople, they're always going to need a car to get around and do their job. And making our cities a space where there are fewer cars is better for everyone, including those who need cars. So I just want to, counteract the idea that I'm anti-car. I will be open and honest and say that my husband works in the gig economy. He's also a delivery driver himself. And so this does affect my household income as well. This isn't something that I am unaware of as to how it works. But I think what we've seen in the past is, quite frankly, a failure, a moral failing in leadership when it comes to this issue. There is a lack of connection between what is happening in places like Pakistan, where I was born, Bangladesh, where so many of our communities in Tower Hamlets come from, the flooding and the deaths and the heat that they're experiencing right now, and the number of cars that get driven across our borough, through our borough today. This isn't about demonizing drivers. As I said, my husband is one. This is about saying, how do we tackle the climate crisis and what is better for everyone? And just a few months ago, someone died in Tower Hamlets through a car collision. Cars are weapons, right? When they're used incorrectly and poorly, and that is the way they are designed. And the other thing that I want to say is, if you go to the Royal London Hospital, if you go and visit their children's ward and have a look at how many children are affected by respiratory illnesses because of pollution in Tower Hamlets. And that is why I consider this a moral failing here. Low traffic neighborhoods are one of the most basic, simple ways of saying that anyone who doesn't need access to this road, you can take the longer way around. And if that adds 15 minutes to your journey, I think we can afford that. When we're talking about deaths from air pollution, when we're talking about collisions, when we're talking about, you know, I've been door knocking, right? Road safety comes up again and again as a top 5 issue for people. They are concerned. And it's a negative cycle. If you don't feel safe taking your kids to school because of the traffic, you're also going to jump into a car. It makes it unsafe for everyone. And I think it is the job of leadership to say, this is the wrong direction. We need to move. We need to shift. Um, and so, yeah, I make no secret about the fact that I want safer streets. I want calmer streets. And I think if anyone thinks about what they enjoy, the kind of place they want to live in, no one wants to live in traffic. No one wants to circle the block for 20 minutes at a time looking for a parking space because there's too many cars. It's all connected. Let's think bigger about this. And then the final point, sorry, I know I've gone on about this a lot. The final point on this is if you look at the cycle lanes in Tower Hamlets, who will you see using it? I bet you will see migrant men of colour who are poorly paid, going at breakneck speed because the platforms take advantage of them and basically pay them minimum wage or below minimum wage sometimes, just so other people can get their food delivery items on, like get their meals. And I don't think it's right that their safety is put at risk because we don't have safe cycling infrastructure, because it's not safe to walk and cycle, because there's so many cars passing through. So it's as you can tell, it's a topic I'm really passionate about. But this isn't about being anti-car. Let's be serious. There's loads of people who need cars and should have them. We need to free up space so that those who need it can use it properly, and those who don't have better ways of getting about.
Okay, thank you. You've highlighted low rates of recycling in the borough. What new measures would the Greens consider for residents and businesses?
So what I want to recognise first and foremost is that this is a systemic failure that goes, it's not just about the council, it is about the country as a whole and how we do recycling. We do need to, and we know that there are plans put in place to have a simpler London-wide system. However, I do think it is about making it simpler for people at home to recycle. I think it is an unfair burden put on people to decide whether this is the right kind of plastic or this is the right kind of cardboard and whether you can recycle it or not. And I am someone who's actually fairly literate and fairly aware about these issues, and yet still it is really difficult. Sometimes I'm looking at this and going, can I recycle this? Is this recyclable? Because the information isn't clear by the producers, right? So I think placing the emphasis on the end point of recycling misses the point just a little bit. What are we doing to stop the production of these harmful packaging? I think we need to look a lot harder. And this will be a London Council issue. It won't be Tower Hamlets on its own. Tower Hamlets is one of the densest places in the UK. But I think with clear communication and simpler recycling, we need to make this a priority. I think there needs to be a review in terms of like how often are collection rates happening, because as we've seen in recent days, there's been news reports, there's people who have been stacked to the top and those collections are not happening, or they're being skipped, or they're not frequent enough. We need to make waste a real priority, and I feel like it's dropped down the priority list. But I think in this election, certainly, I hear it on the doorstep a lot.
Okay, I just want to clarify quickly. So what? So obviously, on a national scale,
Mm.
with labelling, there's not so much you can do as a council leader. But what do you think are the core issues that are causing low recycling rates, and what do you think you could do to cut them down?
I mean, storage is a big issue. Like, if you want to recycle, more often than not you will need space in a tiny flat to make all of these compartments. And if you live in a high-rise tower block, where can you find that space, and can you make it a priority? And so I think doing something as simple as having communication to people, to say, making it really, really simple: this is what you can recycle, this is what you can't. As much of that burden as possible should be on the MRFs, the materials recycling recovery facilities who process this. So trying to get them to do as much of the sorting as possible, so that the people at home need to do much less. So it's about communication, it's about engaging the MRFs to do a lot more, and it is about providing people with the right kind of bags. Like, to ask people to go to the library at a particular time within these hours on this particular day to collect some recycling sacks is not cutting it. Everyone should get their own, boxes that they can fit nicely on top of their fridge if they've got room, or it should be a nice contained thing that you would be proud to keep in your flat, right? And that should encourage people to do more. A lot of this is about, like, the basic logistics of how it works. It's filled with friction at every single point. How can we think from the start to the end, make it frictionless?
Okay, thank you. So the current administration has invested significantly in law enforcement to tackle crime. In Bristol, the Greens have rejected heavier policing in favour of tackling the social factors underlying crime. Would you consider the same approach in Tower Hamlets?
So I think this comes down to, how do you view the world, and how do you view the ills that the world has? And when I look around me, I've said this before. When I see 11, 12-year-old black and brown boys standing in the corner, I think this could be my son in 10 years' time, right? How did these young boys get here? What were the factors involved in getting them here? And across the nation, our prisons are full. So we know that locking people up is not a deterrent, and we can't afford to do that anyway. So what's the solution here? So the solution has to be looking at housing, as I said before, combating poverty, investing in youth infrastructure, investing in mental health. So much of this is actually just mental health crisis and people not having the right support. Even things like, as there are, and then I'm thinking about myself and crime. There are places that I wouldn't go out as a lone woman in the dark at night. It doesn't feel safe. What does feel safe is places that are well populated, well lit. I see people passing around and it's busy. That makes me feel safe. So we need to invest in things like lighting. And just going back to the transport piece, actually one of the safest ways for me to get home would be on a bike. So this is just going back to why cycle lanes are a good idea for lots of different people and lots of different reasons. It is way safer for young women to get on a line bike than it is to potentially be with strangers and feeling like they're alone with strangers in a confined space. And so I think there are just, the way we think about crime needs to be more expansive, needs to be more holistic. We've locked so many people up. Where's it got us?
Thank you. So on your at your introductory speech, you said that infrastructure was creaking. Where would you invest funds in your first budget to improve infrastructure?
That's a really good question. One of the unseen things when it comes to infrastructure, and people don't even think about it, is childcare. And I think we want to look at childcare. And again, like I said, the manifesto is coming, but I think it's a underexplored angle, and it's a very gendered angle as well. So my son is now just over 1, And it's something that I've actually, this whole world, I'm coming to terms with at how unsupported primary carers are. And we're going to do something about it. We're going to do something about it.
Thank you. So, okay. Um, Next, many voters in the world are frustrated today with politicians and party politics. Why do the Greens argue that they'll be different?
Well, I don't think we argue that we're going to be different. I think the fact is we are different. And I think you know that from the way we campaign, the way we talk about issues, the way we speak to people, the way we engage with people, the way we turn up on the doorstep. So I don't think it is an argument. I think we live our values. Anyone who has any familiarity with the Greens, I'm not going to hear people counteract that. But in terms of like, if we were to win power, how would we go about things differently? We are open and collaborative. These are our values. We share power. When we get power, we share power. That is something that I truly, truly believe. And we will try to push the envelope as to how far can we take power sharing within the current structures that we have. We want to include and invite residents into our decision-making process, and not just through surveys here and there. We're talking radical change here in terms of what does a participatory budget look like? What percentage of the overall budget could we set aside for communities to invest where they think it should go? We're going to have a look at all of these like creative experiments, I would say, that we know have yielded positive results across the country. We also want to look at, a community wealth fund. We're drawing inspiration from, like, we've seen what's going on in Camden. What could that look like in Tower Hamlets? So yeah, in a couple of weeks' time, we will have a manifesto, which will have lots of details, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of the kinds of things we want to explore and really try and push the envelope as to what a progressive, accountable government looks like.
And if you are elected, you'll be new to political office. What relevant experience will you bring to the role?
So my relevant experience, I think first and foremost, is as a resident in the ward that I live in and in the borough that I live in. So having really deep knowledge of the area. I've worked in policy and in campaigning for over a decade now. And so I bring that experience. The other thing that I would say is I bring completely new perspective to local government. I don't think it's healthy to have the same people circling power for 20 years. That's not good for me. It's not good for the community. It's not good for democracy. So this is about bringing fresh ideas. And of course, I am so open to learning, but the actual things that you need to learn, I don't think that's the difficult bit. I think the difficult bit is, do you have the skills to understand where people are coming from, hear what they have to say, work together collaboratively to come up with ideas, and also set a vision. Those are the things that I think we need. It's not the detailed, like, the detailed knowledge of like local government is not going to be absent. That's the whole point of having a whole roster of councillors and having all of the council officers. So I think it's time that we have a fresh break in Tower Hamlets, and we're hoping to be that fresh break.
That's all the questions I have. Do you have anything to add?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would just say that, I think it's important that people understand where I'm coming from. And I think it is important that people know that actually I was a part of the Labour movement for a long time. And Tower Hamlets Labour has held Tower Hamlets for a really, really long time, decades upon decades. And unfortunately, with Aspire, it is the same vein. It is, you kind of see it with the housing policy. It is capitalism 101 baked into the system. And so the Green Party is an actual break. I think so many people are disgusted with the way national government equivocated over the Gaza genocide. So many people are disgusted with the way the national government has treated women of colour in the Labour Party and expelled them. Um, and so many people are actually disappointed in Aspire. They had such great hopes as to where we could go and what we could do. And the Green Party has real momentum. We've taken a moral leadership stance when it comes to Palestine. We were the first national party to pronounce that this was a genocide when other people were doing a lot of hand wringing. And what I genuinely want to get across is we are not factitious in any sense of the word. We will work with others, and we know how to work with other people, because this isn't about big egos. This isn't about, who's the big man in power here. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense. We've got to come together for the best of Tower Hamlets. And I think we can do it. I'm feeling really positive. I think we can do it.
Okay, thank you.